going on, you guys? It's Ariel here. Before we get into today's review, just a little reminder that there is going to be spoilers everywhere in regards to the game footage that is shown and the contents of the review itself. But if you've not played L.A Noire yet, I would recommend playing it or watching a playthrough. If you don't mind spoilers, enjoy the video. The year is 1947, 2 years after the end of World War II, and our main protagonist, Cole Phelps, a decorated United States Marine Corps veteran, finds himself amidst tragedy after tragedy. The story of this game follows Phelps along his journey from being a patrol officer to a detective to working homicide, then vice, and by the end, demoted to arson. This title was released in 2011 and had one thing that made it incredibly ahead of its time: the facial capture. With the interrogation feature being a key point in this game that the player needs to experience, the faces of each person interrogated need to look realistic and readable. Now, while this was achieved and this game did some really intriguing things, it also fell flat and lacked a solid identity with how many plot lines it has embedded in it. What's going on, you guys? It's your huggable hipster here. Welcome back to the channel. Let's dive into my review of L.A Noire. Now, at some points, people will ask me, Ariel, this game is old. Like, why do you review older games constantly? And I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not working as a journalist at a company at the moment, so my time is my own, and I can review whichever games I please. Right now is the time for me to get through my backlog and games that I never got a chance to play, so I'm really happy about that. So while, yeah, there are a lot of titles newer that are coming out that I'll be reviewing, a lot of older titles I really want to put my attention towards as well. Let's cut to the chase. Face tracking is by far the biggest reason why anyone should experience this game. That said, the technology of facial capture was somewhat new to this degree, even though the use of motion capture and facial tracking began in the 80s and the 90s. It's still a major advancement in how it was used and its purposes in the game. You need to keep track of how the character is moving their face in interrogation scenes to make an accurate decision on whether to play the good cop, the bad cop, or accuse them of a crime committed. There are some graphical glitches in the facial tracking at points. It would look like someone slapped on a picture of a person over top of the face, or like the picture of a face was printed on it, and I had a hard time really capturing what the person was saying. Since this game isn't new and came out in 2011, let's look at it in terms of how it is when it came out. With older titles, we can't hold them to the same expectations of games that are currently coming out. Now, this game was way ahead of its time, not just because of the facial tracking, but because of how the narrative design was done in certain instances. This game's story took place in 1947. The game showcased and represented the history in a way that came as close as possible to being accurate. L.A Noire showed racism, the misogyny, and corrupt nature of police during the time. The game covered these difficult topics respectfully and in a way that will hopefully educate people on them. Getting hit across the face, so to speak, with anti-Semitism when first going into this game really took me off guard, but then I reminded myself that this is a historically driven game that showcases what happened after World War II. Now, just to make something abundantly clear, when a game accurately shows history and what people went through, I don't mind the usage of racism and other concepts as themes. It's when it's inappropriately or incorrectly used to spark rage. Utilizing misogyny, racism, anti-Semitism as themes in a video game is going down a very slippery slope and can really become dangerous for the company if not utilized correctly. I think in L.A Noire, these topics were handled very well. It was at a point of where, okay, these things happened, you know, let's acknowledge it. Let's see this game for what it is and go from there. Now, this is something I forgot to mention in the article, but I'm going to mention it here right now, of where I really like the way this game didn't sugarcoat what happens in history. These things happened, we learned from them, and we understood that they're bad. Like, misogyny is bad. You don't do that. Being a racist is bad. You don't do that. Anti-Semitism is bad. We don't do that. The game didn't sugarcoat anything. The game went in and it showed how just gruesome and not pretty history actually is. As I got through the game, I noticed that the story was lacking in identity. There were concepts that each chapter built on, not just one singular idea across the board. In Chapter 3, Homicide Desk, you go through all of the murders of each woman, and it wasn't until I got to the final chapter of Homicide Desk that I felt that there was a tangible story. The cutscenes in the Quarter Moon murders were some of the best in the game. After that, L.A Noire just became repetitive and dull. One minute the game is a horror title, the next it's a murder mystery, and another minute it's a war story with intense flashbacks. There was so much going on, and with each passing chapter, even the DLC entries, I found that a lot of them had this vague idea that they ran with instead of one linear idea across the entirety of the game's story. Also, I'm not sure why, and this is a bit of a side note, but the DLC chapters would randomly interrupt the main storyline, which took me out of whatever immersion I might have experienced. On top of that, the audio design would be okay for a minute and then would randomly cut out when I was leaving buildings, again completely severing immersion and the flow of the game. And at the point where Phelps cheats on his wife, I thought that, okay, while this is jarring in a good way where I didn't see it coming, it also didn't make sense for Phelps' character arc. He never hit a woman, he would always be the one to stick up for the downtrodden, and he was a model citizen. The effort to make him the good cop with a sordid past held little to no meaning for me because of how the story was paced and how the character was portrayed up until the final chapter of the game. When it comes down to it, I think there was so many good ideas in this game that all of them were just thrown together in a very haphazard way that none of those singular ideas got a chance to breathe. I would have much rather that the game focus on being strictly a murder mystery or a post-war game instead of just multiple chapters that have one focus but also reference ideas from across the entirety of the game, which makes the flow of the game confusing. After going through another Rockstar game previously, I had done GTA 5, I was interested in diving into a quote-unquote older Rockstar title. And while yes, I thought that the game was repetitive and snooze-worthy at points where you're just assigned cases, interrogate suspects, find evidence, wash, rinse, repeat, the game also had some golden moments that we see creep into later Rockstar games. And also, just as a side note, the driving mechanic in this game, oddly enough, is better than the one in GTA 5, make it make sense. Other things such as the combat and the running were a bit wonky at times and the characters would get stuck on items rather easily. The interactions with Phelps and each partner he has creates this great dynamic throughout the game, and the witty banter and sarcasm I see gets put into other titles such as GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2. Granted, it's not as defined in L.A Noire, obviously, but I saw the growth and budding of what was to be, and that's something special. But you guys, that was my review of L.A Noire. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you guys like my face and what I do, please be sure to subscribe and hit that bell down below. May you find your worth in the waking world, your hunter. Stay casually nerdy, and I will see you all in the next video. Umbasa.